Welcome back to the Cellar Dwellers Film Reviews. And I hate to say it, but I don't really remember what multiverse movie we're talking about today. Let me check. One second. Not that one. 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 Definitely not that one. Oh. The Flash. So yeah, DC Comics and The Flash is the latest one to jump on the multiversal bandwagon. As you saw just a moment ago, it feels like everybody and their mother is making some sort of multiversal content to elicit some sort of cheap pops, or maybe it's to make up for the lack of significant storytelling. I don't need to mention those other projects I showed earlier. Today, we're solely here just to talk about The Flash. So I think it's pretty obvious to anybody that's picked up a DC comic book in the last 10 years that this film is heavily inspired by the 2011 graphic novel Flashpoint. In that graphic novel, Barry Allen, the Flash, figures out that if he runs fast enough, he can travel faster than the speed of light and go back through time. This causes a few problems with the universal makeup of that story, seeing as the first thing Barry decides to do is to go back in time and stop his mother from being murdered. Thus, he never becomes the Flash. When he travels back to the future to see how his life would have turned out, he finds that Bruce Wayne is no longer Batman. He begins to lose his powers. The Amazonians and the Atlanteans are at war with each other. Superman is in a Russian holding cell somewhere. And to top it all off, the Reverse Flash is on the loose. Everything sort of seems to pile up against Barry until he figures out how to fix things to the best of his ability and get back to what then becomes the New 52 continuity of the DC universe. I know that's a lot of word vomit, but I'll relate it into the plot of the movie. The film begins with a very similar premise. Barry figures out he can travel back through time and stops his mother from being murdered. He tries to travel back to the future, but is pushed out of the Speed Force bubble that he created by what we later learn to be the Dark Flash. So, in this time period that he finds himself in now, he encounters an 18-year-old version of himself who does not yet have the Flash's abilities. He also finds an older Bruce Wayne, played by Michael Keaton, who I suppose you can say is reprising his role as Batman, but it's not the same Batman, so the lines are a little blurred. Now, in trying to give his otherworld counterpart the speed powers, Barry ends up losing his own, and with a terrible case of bad timing, this is when General Zod decides to invade Earth. Yet, there's no Clark Kent to defend the planet. This leads the two Barrys and Batman to seek out Supergirl, and when they do find her, she has a deep-seated cynicism towards the human race, which she eventually overcomes and decides to help them fight General Zod. However, none of the possible outcomes that the Flashes encounter end well for Supergirl. She dies in every single one. Shortly after, it's revealed that Otherworld Barry is the one that becomes the Dark Flash based on his obsession of traveling through time to find the perfect outcome for the final battle. The problem with this is that he's killed after not even 2 minutes on the screen. This is where the multiversal cheap pops come in. The Flash sees all these different visions of multiple other worlds, featuring some of our favorite characters through history, which I'll get into in a moment when I discuss the cameos. At this point, he travels back to his future, or what he thinks is his future, and in classic Flashpoint fashion, everything sort of works, sort of doesn't. And that's where the movie ends. There's really not a lot of conclusion considering how quickly, no pun intended, the end of the movie creeps up on you. So why then, if I'm assuming you've seen the movie, did I just spend all that time going over the plot? Well, it's because this movie does something that I don't really recommend, and it deviates from the book in a little bit too much of an ambitious way. Of course, in this film, you can't have the Amazonians and the Atlanteans at war with each other. One, because the budget would probably be way too high, and two, you don't want to pay all those actors, Gal Gadot, Jason Momoa, and all of the other characters that you see in those films to come back for what could only be a 5-minute performance. So you substitute that with the General Zod invasion, which is totally fine as a callback to something that happened earlier in this DC universe. This is where my problem with the film really begins. When Barry travels back in time and loses his powers, he needs to work with the other Barry to find Batman to help him figure out how to undo everything that he did. The focus then shifts to General Zod and finding Supergirl, which again, totally fine. If that's what you're aiming for, then go for it. However, The Dark Flash was already teased in a much earlier scene in the movie and left to be a background player to be forgotten about. And this, still, totally fine. A surprise tool that'll help us later, right? You'd think. As the third act fight comes along, it's a lot of spectacle, and it's a lot of really cool spectacle. Some of the best shots in the movie come from this one scene. However, once Other Barry figures out he can time travel, any significance that this final fight has had is gone. The focus then shifts to Other Barry time traveling, and that's it. He goes back again and again and again to try to find the perfect outcome for this fight, never realizing that it's an inevitable event. He just can't do it. The decades that he spends going back in time trying to find a solution is what eventually turns him into the Dark Flash. Okay, you've got some time left in the movie, so the Dark Flash is the big bad guy, right? Wrong. He dies. So what's the point of even including this Dark Flash if he just bites the dust a few minutes later? 1, it undermines the character of Other Barry and Dark Flash. 2, undermines their relationship. And 3, undermines the entire final fight that we just sat through. And not only did we sit through the fight, we sat through the build-up to the fight, which feels like nothing when the Dark Flash is killed off. The inclusion of the Dark Flash in these final moments is really only the catalyst to catapult the movie into multiverse pops. Like I mentioned earlier, when you see the other worlds that come in, you see Adam West's Batman, Christopher Reeve Superman, George Reeve Superman, and some other cameos that come and go pretty quickly. Now, a little bit of a side note, the one cameo that, I kid you not, literally got me out of my theater seat was seeing Tim Burton designed Nicolas Cage Superman. It was quite possibly one of the most incredible theater experiences I've ever had since Avengers Endgame. And that is saying something. So after all those cameos, Barry runs back to the future, and after a few short minutes, movie's over. The way this movie continued with its various plot lines, never really seeing them through to the end, is something that really contributed to the sudden finale of the movie. Not only that, it made it feel like almost every single event we were seeing was eventually going to be inconsequential. Now, in somewhat of a contradiction, while the script doesn't handle the plot in a very great way, it handles character development really well. Most notably, obviously, Barry Allen has to figure out with suddenly being the responsible member of the team, dealing with how to teach another speedster how to use the powers, coming to grips with the fact that his selfish desire to have his mother live might not be as important as saving an entire universe, and yet still having trouble making that decision in the end. The person I really loved seeing was Ben Affleck's Batman, and I know his portrayal can be a little bit divisive on the character, but he's my Batman. To me, Ben Affleck will always be top of the line. So to see him have a sort of send-off moment in this film with the line, "maybe some other time," really hit home for me. And to see him have one final Batman sequence chasing the criminals through the street just brought me an immense joy. It's really sad that Ben Affleck's time as Batman was cut short, but that'll be a discussion for another day. I personally think that Sasha Calle's Supergirl was the stand-up performance in this film. Contrary to what Henry Cavill Superman went through being the beacon of hope and the protector of the people, Sasha Calle's Supergirl initially took the role of, well, I'm not even a human. Why should I help them? That sort of character trait was kind of brushed over pretty quickly to get her to turn to help the Flash, but I understand this isn't her movie. And if at all possible, I would love to see Supergirl move into a new role in the new DC universe so that we can continue to delve into that personality and, frankly, just so we can have more Supergirl on the big screen. Elephant in the room, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you can find hundreds of articles online talking about it. The CGI in this movie was not good. It really says something when a big budget superhero blockbuster has worse animation than a mid-2000s Xbox 360 video game. And the reasoning that everything looks a little weird because that's how Barry sees it when he's running, that's just a damage control induced excuse. I mean, to be totally honest with you, some of them were a little bit hard to look at and highly, highly distracting. Like those babies in the beginning, or Henry Cavill's cameo. I mean, didn't they butcher his face enough with the mustache CGI? Overall, yeah, I did enjoy this movie, but I'm left with more questions than answers with how this fits into the DC Universe's future and what this means for the cleaning of the slate when it comes to James Gunn's and Peter Safran's DC Universe going forward. At the end of the day, this is a popcorn movie. And I think if you like DC Comics, if you've read DC Comics and have some sort of investment in the characters, you'll find enjoyment out of this film. I think it's just unfortunate that this movie sort of bit off more it could chew. I understand that Flashpoint is where this series needed to go to get everything out of the way to make room for the new films coming in the next few years. It's just sad to see that a book as rich as Flashpoint gets dulled down to this movie where no plot points are really explored to the point where the audience feels satisfied with them. That being said, I will still be waiting with bated breath for the next DC film, and I am forever grateful to The Flash for giving us, finally, live-action Nicolas Cage as Superman.